Well, greetings, everyone. I'm Pastor Evan Howard, coming to you today from one of my favorite places, the East Bay Bike Path. We welcome you on Sunday, February the 14th, 2021. Of course, according to the Hallmark calendar, this is Valentine's Day. But according to the Christian calendar, it is often celebrated as the Transfiguration of the Lord, the Sunday just before Ash Wednesday and the beginning of Lent. I'd like to share a message with you today called How to Find the Love of Your Life. Don't be fooled. This isn't going to be a message that you could find on like one of those romance websites or dating websites out there. It's more a way of saying that in the Christian tradition, love is at the center of everything. And it can be objective in the sense of Valentine's Day, finding your true love, an object for your love. But it also is subjective, the love within ourselves. So let's look at both of those today. Valentine's Day is actually named for a 3rd century priest by the name of Valentinus. He lived in Rome, and he was martyred in the year 270 on the 14th of February. And the reason for his martyrdom was because the emperor at the time, Claudius II, had outlawed marriage. He believed that marriage competed with his desire to expand his kingdom because not enough soldiers were going into the Roman army. They were more concerned about their wives and children back home. And so this priest named Valentinus would marry people in secret. And when it was discovered by the Roman authorities, of course they didn't like it, they put him in prison. And as the legend goes, on the night before his execution by beheading, he had developed a compassionate relationship with the jailer's daughter who was very ill. And he prayed for her and she was healed. And on the night before his execution, he wrote her a letter that he signed, "Always your Valentine." And that's how we got this idea of exchanging love letters and various other kinds of mementos and gifts for the love of our life. But interestingly enough, before we can truly find the love of our lives in a relationship that lasts, it begins within ourselves. The subjective precedes the objective. That's one of the key insights of the Transfiguration of the Lord. Jesus is in the area of Caesarea Philippi in Mark chapter 9, and he's ready to make his journey to Jerusalem. He never gets any farther away than this, Caesarea Philippi, where Peter proclaims, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And after that proclamation, Jesus invites Peter and James and John to go with him up to a high mountain, perhaps Mount Hermon. And while they're there, they see him transfigured. His clothing becomes whiter than snow, and the glory shines all around him. And he appears with Elijah and Moses, the most prominent Old Testament prophets. And Peter sees this and he says, "Why don't we construct shelters for each of you?" But before he can do that, a cloud descends, encompassing Jesus and Moses and Elijah. And there's a voice that speaks that says, "This is my Son whom I love. Listen to him." It's such a powerful part of this passage that the glory that descends on Jesus, Peter and James and John are able to share because they're up with him on the high mountain. And this is just before he goes to Jerusalem, so we know that what was his glory about? His experience of Jerusalem was showing God's love for humanity in the most profound way ever. And so the glory was a prefiguring of that, a revelation of God's love, which was at the heart of who Jesus was and everything that he did. But they don't seem to understand that. Peter doesn't. In fact, he misses the point almost entirely by just wanting to build these booths and to stay there in that moment and to objectify Jesus, when really what Jesus' love was all about is all of us receiving God's love within ourselves. We can't do that fully. Harry Emerson Fosdick used to use the illustration of a tiny puddle of water that forms in the sand next to the ocean. The most that any life could have is maybe as much love as what you see behind me in that water, but compare that to the ocean, which is vast, which you cannot see across, which you cannot encompass. That's what Jesus' experience of love was about. And that's what we're invited to share, not to just observe it in him. We are told in the scriptures, for example, in the 2nd chapter of 1 Peter, he is our example and we are to follow in his steps. And the Apostle Paul reminds us in 2 Corinthians chapter 3 that the face of Moses when he came down from Sinai was veiled. But when we see Jesus, the veil is taken away. His glory shines so that we are able to receive it and go with him from glory to glory. That's what his love is all about. That's what we experience within ourselves when we encounter that love and when we embrace that love, so that we too are transfigured with Jesus. That's what the meaning is of those words. This is my Son whom I love. Listen to him as he teaches you about this love. From a Christian perspective, any experience of joy or happiness that we have in this life is related to that love. And so we should be highly motivated and inspired to invite more and more of it into our lives. If you look back on your various experiences and your relationships, you will often find that this is the case. You connected with the Lord. A love that was greater than your own came through you, and you were able to share that with other human beings, and it came back to you manyfold. It really inspires us when we see that kind of love, and it often surprises us. Just this week I had the experience of at 8 o'clock in the morning getting a call from my sister Marcia. She's a couple of years older than me, and of my 4 sisters, she is the one who is doing such heroic work caring for my 99.9-year-old mother who has Alzheimer's. And Marcia's husband also has kidney failure, so he's on dialysis. So when I get a call from her at 8 o'clock our time, she lives in Oregon, it's 5 o'clock her time. Actually, every time I get a call from her, I think it could be the call when she tells me that my mother has made her transition from this life. But instead, it was calling me to tell me something else. My mother has not known who I am for probably at least 3 years. Last time I saw her, she kept asking me, "Now, who are you?" I was taking her to the doctor, and she was saying, I don't know who you are and I don't know where you're taking me. But Marcia had called in the morning, 5 o'clock her time, to tell me, Evan, you'll never guess what happened. Mom woke me up this morning by calling your name. She was calling your name in her sleep. And that was something that just was so emotional for me to hear, that my mother, I'm her only son actually, that she's calling my name and that maybe she does remember me. And it led to a deeper conversation with my sister about this time in her life where she never knows when she walks into a room with either her husband or her mother whether they'll still be alive. And that's something that's so tough to live with, and she's had to call rescue a number of times, both for her husband and for our mom. And so I said to her, Marcia, you don't even realize it, but you are a first responder. And she said to me, you know, if I were in my 20s and somebody would have told me that this was going to be my life, it would have totally freaked me out. But day by day, as I live this life, I accept it. It's what I've been given, and I'm trying to do my best with it. And from the outside, when we see the sacrificial ways in which she's serving our mother and our family, that's an example of love that surprised her, surprises the rest of us as well. But it gives us something to cling to, something to lift up, something that gives us inspiration. That kind of love begins within ourselves. And when we experience it, and when we live in it, and when it's growing in us, then we truly have love to give to others. That's what the voice wants us to know. This is my beloved Son. Listen to him. Listen to his words. Listen to his actions. Invite them into your own life. There's glory that he received, but every time you love as he did, you enter in and share that glory as well. I think we can all relate to Peter's desire to stay on that mountaintop where they saw the glory of Jesus and they entered into it just for a moment. And that's why Peter says, Lord, how about if we build shelters for you and for Moses and for Elijah? In other words, he wanted to stay with his rapturous experience, this transfiguring, transforming experience of love. Let's just stay there. And Jesus says, no, we've got to go down from the mountain. We've got to go to Jerusalem together. And this is so relevant to how to find the love of our lives. It begins within ourselves, to be so full of God's love that we have love to give, instead of using that tired phrase which we all use from time to time when we found our true Valentine. Oh, you're not meeting my needs. You're not fulfilling my expectations in one way or another in this relationship. Well, that's the opposite way that really works. What really works is to be so full of love that you have so much love to give. So you can't just build a shelter for your high moments on the mountaintop of romantic experience. You got to go back down to the valley. We all do. And be willing to go to Jerusalem together as Jesus invited the disciples to do. There's a book that my spiritual director keeps telling me about. Every time this subject comes up in my work with him, it's by a Buddhist writer by the name of Jack Kornfield. The title of the book is After the Ecstasy, the Laundry. After the Ecstasy, the Laundry. So that's how we find the love of our lives. To realize that it's not all ecstasy, it's not all roses, it's not all Valentine's Day. There's also just the everyday details of life which can get boring, and they can get laborious, and they can get burdensome, and you can get tired of each other, and you can get on each other's nerves. But if you keep opening your heart subjectively to that love that Jesus came to express, then we can express it to the objective person in our lives whom we can touch and whom we can hear and whose presence we are with. You can't stay on the mountaintop. There's much more to love than that. I want to leave you with a story I've told you many times, actually, because every time I tell it, people tell me how much it means to them. So some of you have probably not heard it. It's from the author Richard Paul Evans, who wrote that best-selling book, The Christmas Box. Shortly after his writing career became successful, he was going on lots of different speaking engagements around the country. But what people didn't know is how much his own marriage was suffering, even though he was talking to people about love stories. And his daughter Jenna said to him, "You and Mom argue so much that I'm really worried that you're going to get divorced." And pretty soon, or years later, she actually said to him, "I wished you would have gotten divorced to just stop the pain." And he tells about being in the shower in a Ritz-Carlton hotel in Atlanta and just crying his heart out, realizing that he was probably going to have to divorce his wife because they just couldn't work it out. They just couldn't get along. And so he started to pray about it, and he spent all night praying about it. And when he got home, he was lying in bed next to his wife, Carrie, and he felt we're inches apart, but we're really miles apart. How am I going to bridge this gap? And somehow this revelation came to him in the morning that he would say to Carrie, which he did, "How can I make your life better today?" And she looked at him with a stunned expression on his face. "You know what you can do?" she said. "You can take out the garbage." And you know what he did? He took out the garbage. And then the next day he said, "Carrie, how can I make your life better today?" And this time she said, "Richard, you can clean the garage." And you know what he did? He cleaned the garage. And day after day, he kept asking the same thing. And finally she said to him, "Richard, will you stop asking me that?" And it just kind of came out spontaneously, "What can I do to make your day better?" And they both realized that they had a share in the problem equally, and they both had a share in the solution. And from there, they began to think of the other more than themselves, and they started to forgive one another and to rebuild their relationship, their marriage, from the ground up. And Richard has told that story, and it's touched millions of people around the world, including me and my wife, Carol. On this Valentine's Day, which is also the Transfiguration of the Lord, may you experience more and more of the love that was expressed in Jesus Christ. And may you be empowered and be inspired to share it so that you find the love of your life. Amen.